the book Science of Logic, the German philosopher Hegel looks within himself and he says, let me abandon all thought. Let me just start from nothing. And if I start from nothing, using just thought and rational logic, can I construct the world around me? In other words, can I construct space-time, quantum mechanics, gravity in my mind using what he called the dialectic method? One of the most fundamental questions in physics has always been, what is the source? What is the starting point for all of the foundations of physics? And Hegel has put forward the idea that maybe it's just thought and logic and everything emerges from there. What do you think? Is that possible?
Well, yeah, first of all, I think that's a very good pretty good summary of what Hegel actually did. And yes, maybe we get into how it actually does seem to be possible. That's maybe the interesting aspect that connects Hegel to category theory, which is an observation due to William Levere, who at some point, I guess first he was just a category theorist and interested in Hegel and dialectic, and at some point he noticed that these things hang together, and he made a quite impressive observation there, that there is something in Hegel that can be formalized. Right, to this extent, I should maybe say, you said Hegel started with rational logic. And that is exactly the point that people trip over when they actually read Hegel, because it does not sound very rational and logical for the most part. It sounds actually quite wild. And I don't think actually it's the right... So this led to a lot of confusion, historically important confusion. Like Russell, for instance, setting up the modern axiomatic system of mathematics arose as an opposition to Hegel. As a young student, he was forced to learn, or at least, Hegel dominated philosophy. And Russell at some point said, no, this cannot be it. If we're being honest, we just don't understand what he's saying, right? So a big problem was that Hegel's stuff sounded impressive. Many people just didn't actually understand a word of it, but still pretended to, which of course led to a huge decline. Nothing worked. So the thing with Hegel is, I think that's important to understand. To my mind, what he actually does, he acts like a modern day seer, you should read him like a poet speaking about something for which there are no words, actually. He's really speaking from intuition much more than from rational logic. Of course, there is a rational aspect to it, but not in the kind of strict sense that we understand as formal logic these
Don't
days.
take him literally. Don't take him word for word. Take the general impression of it.
Yeah, in fact, these books, The Science of Logic, where he goes into this, it's divided into separate volumes. So the first volume is called the objective logic, and the second is called the subjective logic. The second book is much more boring, but much more understandable. So the subjective logic, so he speaks about Aristotelian logic, but this is essentially what we now understand as logic, the deductions. So the second book is actually the boring book. It's because it's understandable. He talks just about actual logic, and it's not actually pretty well written. I mean, it's not... You can't go to that book and find an actual deep insight into actual formal logic. So all the meat is really in this first, the objective logic. And objective is in the sense that it's not in a person, not in an individual person, let's say, but it's a universal phenomenon that he's trying to get at by some kind of inwards-looking process, but not looking in, not into his individual personal self, but kind of in humanities, or into the soul, the abstract soul. So he's trying to feel his way into metaphysics. That's really what it is. This is, he explains somewhere, maybe it's in the foreword, the old meaning of speculation, to be speculative, is to look. Speculare is something like viewing, watching. So what he really tries to do, and he says this at several places, his aim is to make, in his words, to make philosophy more than just the love for science, to make it an actual science, an observational science. And when he says philosophy, we should remember that, for the most part, philosophy was natural philosophy, which is now physics. So he's really, at least in this first book, Objective Logic, he's after metaphysics, and he wants to make it a science in the sense that he wants to actually observe it. So if he had a microscope, if he had a machine with which he could run an experiment, he would have done that. But in the lack of an experiment to go beyond notions of space and time, he just looks inwards and just sees, okay, what can I see? That's really what so that's why I'm saying he's speaking like a seer, really, right? And so that's what he does. He sort of pictorially closes his eyes and looks himself and says, okay, let's start with nothing, a bit like Descartes. Like, what if we forget everything? Okay, there's nothing. And then he's trying to feel and trying to describe to his readers a certain dynamics that he seems to be feeling or seeing. Like you envision absolutely nothing, but then there's nothing, and so nothing exists. So it goes along these lines. So apparently, so suddenly, even though you started with absolutely nothing, the next moment you see, well, there's some existence here. But the existence has no further qualities. It just exists because it's nothing. So there's no quality to it. So the term quality plays a big role in it. So then he says, now actually we went from nothing to pure existence. And so then he sees, there's a kind of a dynamics there that's in somewhere, right? This doesn't happen in space or time. This happens in some space of notions. And his aim is then to somehow from this internal dynamics, as if in a seed, right? A seed is just sitting there and it looks inanimate. But there is, of course, some motion in there. If you put it in the right conditions, it can start to grow. And that's really what he observes. He observes this cosmic egg of nothingness, observes it internally. He envisions how it continues to grow. So next, then he claims, out of the fact that we have this dichotomy between nothing and pure being arises some kind of qualitative being, right? Previously, it was just pure being, and now some quality exists, and then it keeps going in a process that has later been called dialectical. I'm not sure if he uses that word very much at all, but that's certainly how it's known these days.